Hey everyone, it's Aaron the Pedantic, and I regret to inform you that I have seen the light. I have played Dungeon World, and now I can never go back to the OSR. The OSR sucks. What was I doing all this time, wasting my time? Okay, no, I'm just screwing with you. It's okay. So I played Dungeon World on Monday for the first time. I haven't played. I've read other PBTAs before. I've never played a PBTA before. This was my first experience. So I'm going to tell you how it went. Character creation took a long time. It took a long time, but it needed to take a long time because of what exactly the game is trying to do. There are people that are going to say that Dungeon World is OSR, and I will say nay. Now, the reason I say nay is not necessarily, okay, I say nay to a degree. It is not old school revival. It may be old school renaissance, perhaps to a degree. If you consider the way that some people used to play old school games to be old school. If you have a particular play style that you're thinking of that involves very strict procedures with keeping up with time and wandering monsters and very specific obstacles and all that kind of stuff, well, you can still do that. Then basically it's not going to look like an OSR game. Does it play like an OSR game? Not terribly. What it really plays like is it plays like a better version of what people have tried to accomplish in the 5e games that I've played. Now, I'm not dissing 5e. I've put my hate 5e days behind me, where I spent a great deal of time saying 5e is terrible, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. 5e is not terrible. But what I'm trying to say is that what Dungeon World is really good at is what I've seen a lot of people really try to do with 5th edition. So one of those is go deep into backstories and try and have that be something that's relevant at the table. So the way that doesn't pan out quite as much in 5e is that in 5e, you don't really have the reinforcements that you get in Dungeon World. So what I mean by that is that in Dungeon World, you create your characters at the table with each other, and you collectively create those backstories. What you're really creating is a history for your character that's kind of loose, but the biggest part of it is you're creating the relationships between the characters and you're gamifying them. That's the really important thing. 5e does a bit of gamification with these things by having, whenever you do something that's one of your flaws or something like that, then you can get inspiration. But inspiration is fleeting. You get it for one use and then it's gone. Whenever you're looking at Dungeon World, these things are something that follow your character until you resolve them, and then you get experience for them, and then you have new bonds and things like that you can introduce. Ultimately, you're going to start your game with a group of characters that they all know each other or are connected together somehow in some way, and they all, you have an idea of what kind of brought them to this point, how they feel about each other. I mean, that's not really something that a lot of games are going to push necessarily, especially 5e. There are these things there. There's the elements there, but they're not tied together like they are with Dungeon World. So basically, a lot of times whenever I've played 5th edition, I felt like backstories are basically pointless because of the fact that players often neglect to make them matter as far as how they play their character or anything like that. A lot of times they'll have this grand idea of how their character is going to be, and then they have this backstory that they came up with forever ago. They bring it to the table, and really what they want for the game master to give them a character arc based off of their backstory or something like that, something that they saw in Critical Role. Now, you can do this with Dungeon World, absolutely. And it's something that it's easy to do. And you can bring other people into it. This is something that it was possible, even though we weren't even trying to do it. We basically have the stepping stones laid out there to bridge that gap. It's entirely possible with what we had without even really trying, just because of the process that you do creating your characters. But so often the players end up neglecting those things. The GM, yeah, sometimes they will, build arcs around that kind of stuff, but then things become kind of crazy because people might drop in and drop out of the campaign. That's not really 5e's fault. I'm not saying it is. But it's something that does tend to happen. And sometimes the things feel kind of trite because, it's like they're giving you kind of what they want to have resolved in the future and all that kind of stuff, like ahead of time, rather than something that was created organically at the table, which again, I haven't seen. Now, it doesn't mean people don't do it, but I haven't seen a lot of people do session zeros for 5e where they are actually starting from scratch whenever they get there. A lot of times people are like, no, here's my character. I'm just going to tell you about him, and then we're going to learn about the world maybe, and then we're going to just start playing or something like that. And usually they want to start playing pretty quick. So fundamentally, what ends up happening is either they stick to this character that they have created as a separate entity from the party that at large, or they don't. And if they don't, then a lot of times they're adapting to try and fit to what the table kind of needs to have happen. I've done that before in the past because, the super cool character concept I came up with forever ago that I thought would be very fun to implement at the table, it just didn't jive well with everything else. But what does jive well is when everybody's already on the same page whenever you start playing. And that's what this does that makes that better. And it also makes it where the players are rewarded for interacting with those things. It's sitting right on your character sheet. Yes, it does sit on your character sheet on 5e. Shut up. But it also will give you a reward for doing so. And everybody's tied together. So that is one way that it really helps, especially the fact that they're tied together, because, you can have all these cool bonds in 5e about, I wouldn't do this to this kind of person or whatever, but you don't really have anything about your other party members. And a lot of times people don't even think about how did we come together? A lot of times it's like, we're coming together now and we're going to have this super cool story about how we all met. We're going to play it out together at the table. It sucks. It's so lame. In my experience, some people probably have the best time ever with it. And it's probably just super great. But in my experience, it's not really. So enough ragging on character creation and all that kind of stuff. Whenever it comes to the moves. Now, the moves are something that a lot of people poo-poo about. And I get why. If you look at the moves list, it sounds kind of constraining in a way. Because whenever we think about how we play D&D, really the only time that we typically are going to try and limit what exactly we can accomplish is whenever we are in combat. And even then, we usually make room for the idea that we can perform various ability checks and things like that to bridge, just to make stuff happen that's outside of what, is in the normal parameters, what's in the rule books and all that kind of stuff that we can improvise and all that kind of. And some people are like, well, this actually just gives you a move list and it's very specific. Yes, that's true. I didn't find that it was really very limiting though. And I'll give you an example. So I'm playing a wizard. Now, I can cast spells. The others can't cast spells, but that's not really anything too different from what you'd experience in D&D. So I have a move particular to my class for spell casting. Now, so that is an exclusive move there, but most moves that you see are general. Those are moves that anybody can use, and you can use them in all kinds of different ways. So some of this requires some quick thinking from the person who's running the game. So for instance, one of the things that I did was I had prepared spells for investigation type stuff. And then we ended up in the thick of some serious conflict. So really all I had invisibility, which I lost the spell because basically whenever you roll, if you don't roll high enough, something bad happens, and then you can choose which of those bad things happens. Again, that's another thing that a lot of people are probably going to say, I don't like, and I get it. Whenever you're actually doing it, it doesn't feel that bad though. It's just different. So I lost that spell, and the only other one I had left was Detect Magic. Obviously, that's not going to help too much whenever you're dealing with a whole bunch of cultists that are trying to stab you to death. So what did I do? Basically, I tried to whack some people with my staff for a while, and that wasn't terribly effective. I was really holding them at bay. I was pretty good at doing that, and, rather than having this like these serious considerations about, very particular positioning and, is there like an opportunity of attack whenever they try and get by me to attack somebody else and all that kind of stuff, character movement, all those things, turn order, all that stuff. That's not something that you're worrying about. All I basically did was, I knew at that moment that somebody was very trying to save another one of the characters' lives, and they were vulnerable because there were a bunch of cultists that were closing in on them. So I was like, I'm going to stand in front of them and I'm going to swing my staff around, to try and ward them back. And then it's just all I had to do was roll really well. And if so, then, I'm holding them back basically. If I failed, then I probably would have gotten stabbed. And, another moment was whenever I was kind of sick of trying to smack people because it wasn't working very well for me because I'm a weakling. And so I was like, I'm going to run behind that cultist. I'm going to pull its robe up over the top of its head and, cover its face so it can't see. And, it ended up being a very successful maneuver, which these are things that you would try in an OSR game. You would just say, I'm going to do that. Exactly what I just said. Yeah, that's fine. Now, whenever we're talking about warding all of these people off, probably not, not really, because that would kind of clash with some of the other rules that you have for various reasons about positioning and, reach weapons and all that kind of stuff. It's just the thing is that it's very fast paced. Because of the fact that it doesn't deal with a lot of those specifics, but at the same time, it gives the player some control over the world that they may not want, and or they may not be used to. We were playing with a whole bunch of grognards for the most part. I say a whole bunch. Let's see, we had one proper grognard. So I take the two proper grognards, OGGM and Robbie. Both of them have been playing for quite a long time. But that being said, we all had a great time. It was just a matter of getting used to the fact that whenever something goes wrong, sometimes there were moments where we could decide what it was that went wrong. And sometimes when stuff went right, we could decide how it went right. And that was different. And it also, because of the way that would have to work, not that specifically, but a lot of things would have to work, at least the way that things are introduced upon failure, then it means that sometimes there may be things that just pop up merely because of the fact that you rolled poorly or you rolled really well. And so in what I would call that, if you watched my video about is the GM God, I think is what that one was. And I watched that again and I was really embarrassed at how slow and boring that video was. But basically what I called that was bricklaying. And I said that you don't want to do bricklaying as you're playing, because then you might start being impartial. And the reason for that is that you are the one who's basically deciding the physics of the world and all that kind of stuff, the likelihood of a lot of things. And so if you're building things as they go, then, you may be putting things more in their favor. That isn't necessarily true whenever the dice is specifically dictating whether it's a good thing or a bad thing. So that kind of negates, I think, a lot of the problem that I've typically had with that kind of thing. Now, I could be completely incorrect, and Death Bear may correct me and tell me that actually every time that happened, those were things that were already there in the world that he had planned for, that were just activated whenever those failures occurred. That could be the case. And I would probably strive to have things kind of in that way, if at all possible, as much as possible, but maybe not. All in all, it was a very enjoyable experience. I would tell you more about exactly like how the game progressed and all that kind of stuff, but a lot of people don't care. They don't want to hear about, every like little of the events that happen in these games and the characters and all that kind of stuff. Nobody cares about that. That's not what you're here for. You're here for commentary, damn it. That's what you're here for, I think. So that is really all I have to say about it for now. It looks like we're going to be playing again next week, and I'm looking forward to it. I'm still getting my Mutant Crawl Classics game together, and whenever I do, then we will probably start running that once we're done with what we got here. So looking forward to that greatly. But do I hate PBTA? Is it the worst thing ever? No. Dungeon World is actually kind of neat. That's all I got to say about that. Peace out.